So thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, How AI is Reshaping Commercial Real Estate Asset Management. I am Julie Edgett, Paraview's Vice President of Marketing, and I'll be your host and moderator. My guests today are Chase McWhorter, IREI's Managing Director of America, and Paraview's Jeff Wilson, CEO and founder, and Ron Rossi, our Vice President of Client Success. This is an interactive session, so please post your questions in the chat to myself, the host. I will share those in our Q&A portion. We also encourage you to stay through the end so you can receive our step-by-step real estate data organization guide for AI. So now with that, we're all set. So it's time to dive in. First, we're going to start off with a poll. And this particular poll is going to ask us all to share your information about how you're being asked to actually respond and take action on AI this year and in the future. All right, so it looks like most of us have had an opportunity to do that. So now I'm going to end the poll and share out our results. Okay, so with that in mind, Chase, why don't you just share with us how this reflects what you're seeing from and hearing from your members? It looks like 95% of those here in the event today are being asked to really look for solutions in 2026. Is that similar to what you're seeing for your members?
I'd say in short, yes. I think the nuance comes down to kind of how deep groups are going. Whether, I mean, because you could have this, it could just be, yeah, we're using Copilot with Microsoft. So I think it just depends on how deep groups are going within using AI. That'd be what I'm taking from the poll, is you could have a nuance there as far as, again, kind of how deep groups are going within there. I would say the general number as far as this many, I would say I was a little surprised, because we have heard some groups just with kind of data security, things like that. I would say that some groups are a little bit more hesitant. So I think this is positive, that this many groups are definitely being asked to use AI. Again, it would be just interesting to see kind of what that entails as far as what kind of implementation are they doing.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. Also, I'm going to stop sharing this and also ask you, though, Jeff, can you share with us, as a technologist in the real estate industry space, really what you are hearing in the best way to kind of take this information and move forward based on what Chase just shared?
Yeah, for sure. We certainly are seeing, as a software provider, everybody is talking about it at a minimum, and everybody's interested in understanding, how are we as a software company using AI? Are we using AI? What does it look like? What guardrails are we putting around it? But let's first just kind of maybe take a step back and establish a baseline around what it is that we mean when we talk about the use of AI. Where has it been? Where is it today? And where do we think it's going in the future? And Julie, if you can advance the slide a little bit. So interesting chart here. And what this chart is showing, go ahead and click a few more, is that with ChatGPT, if you can remember back in November 22, Chat launched ChatGPT version 3.5. And it seemed like overnight, everybody started talking about it. And we did. And for many of us, we thought, well, man, this was the first kind of invention of AI, but that's really not true. So I want to go back a little bit, kind of pre-November 2022, and just talk about AI in general. And first thing to remember is AI is not just one tool. It's a family of tool sets. The Chat, GPT, and other tools like that are what we call large language models. Before Chat 3.5 was out, we had a lot of other tools such as machine learning, neural networks, predictive and prescriptive analytic tools like IBM Watson, which has been around for a while, Google Translate. If you can remember back when Siri was actually awesome, and Apple was kind of leading in this area, and you would, maybe on your way to work, if you had an iPhone, Siri on your iPhone would say, hey, it's going to take you 15 minutes to get to the office. Well, how did it even know at whatever 7:30 or 8:30 in the morning that you were headed to the office? Well, they were using technology like AI, machine learning, and other predictive type technology such as that. Alexa obviously was falls into that family, as well as a lot of the things that Tesla had been doing with autopilot and some of that pieces. And so pre-Chat GPT, AI was really seen as behind the scenes, a little bit more limited in its use and functionality. And it was very rule based, very pattern recognition based. And then when Chat GPT came out in November, it was a generative AI breakthrough. And we really started to see these large language models be really pretty practical and functional, not just in a conversational way, but they could also, for IT people like us, generate code and generate other types of text from inputs and putting things in. And that really, honestly, we go to a lot of conferences. We're very involved in the industry, and at every single conference that we've attended since then, there's always been a topic or time spent on the use of AI and where it is headed. And I think since kind of late 22, 23, there's really been an explosion of AI tools in a lot of the things that we use day to day. It certainly has been pervasive in all of the major browsers that we use. It's pervasive in all the office tools such as Excel, Google's equivalent of their office productivity tools. We've also more recently seen a lot of explosions in the use of these large language models, but in very highly specialized industries or verticals like law, as an example, or medicine, or education, or finance, or things like that. And even kind of more recently, we're starting to see the use of these tools really gain traction around automation and workflows and very specific agents. Like you could actually very easily and quickly, leveraging Copilot, build HR agents that would, as an example, answer questions about DTO policy and time away and things like that. So you're seeing an explosion of those types of things. Another thing that's really interesting to note that I kind of looked up in preparing for this meeting is the overall global investment in AI tools and technology. So back in 2022, 21, 2021, and these are estimates, the total global investment in AI was about 350 billion annually. A year later in 2022, that number had jumped to 450 billion. Leapfrog a couple of years into 2024, we're now at about $1 trillion annually in spend, and they estimate in 2025 that number is going to reach about $1.5 trillion. Now that's across the entire spectrum, not just in infrastructure and software, but also in services and devices. Clearly, the majority of that spend is in infrastructure, which is defined as data centers and the energy suppliers needed for those data centers. There's huge dollars in that area. And in the software, it's really in the generative AI programming that leads you to Chat 5 and Grok and these other really big large language models. So when you see that much growth and spend, obviously we're in the midst of something that we should consider as somewhat transformative. Now, where it goes, we will begin to talk about, but just in terms of kind of baseline, here's where we've been, here's where we are, and here's where we're going. We're certainly in the middle of something pretty exciting. So,
well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you sharing that. And Chase, I'd like to invite you into the conversation. So after hearing Jeff's points about AI adoption and disruption, again, we had that poll earlier of this audience as well as also your membership. So how are you seeing your members respond and what is on their mind?
Yeah, and I mean, taking a step back, just I think for context, just where IREI sits in the market. So at our core, we're a publishing firm. We have different parts of our platform where we do have membership organizations like the Institute for Real Estate Operating Companies. But our audience is those institutional and high net worth LPs. They're GPs, so the fund managers out there, the consulting world, and then the real estate operators. So I think what we see in light of what Jeff was saying is um, the main thing is just, I think, where do we start? So I think that's the biggest thing, is getting out of um, kind of the theoretical and more into the practical. What can we do?
Mhm.
And it says takeaways from our editorial advisory board meeting. So the way that our publication works is our editorial agenda is driven by an independent investor-led editorial board. So the recent meeting in September, we hold one in April and September. In September, you had about 80 total people, half the room LPs, half the room GPs. Represented in that meeting was about 2.5 trillion in real estate investment. So pretty significant as far as dollars. Obviously not a huge group physically, but represents a lot of money. So if you want to go through and bring up some of the bullet points, I had already kind of referenced that. So I think it's just like the poll indicated, there's definitely a need, desire from these firms to do something. It just comes down to what do we do first? And I think what we hear over and over again is there's that crawl, walk, run. You got to kind of first do the simple things as far as bringing in AI, and I know we'll talk about some of those things. Um, I'd say largely from the LP side, so these are your public pensions, those kind of groups. A big concern is about that data governance. So whether it's warranted or not, the concern that their data could be hijacked, that it raises security issues for kind of all of their different metrics that they're tracking, and it's for the GPs too. I would just say the LPs at least have voiced that concern more vocally as far as kind of the data security. Um, and then I think there's a difference between the big firms, the big fund managers, and then some of the smaller groups. Again, you get into the business for a smaller GP to invest in bringing in AI to their business. You have the bigger groups that can bring in data scientists, they can bring in AI experts to kind of bring their firms along. And then I'd say overall, that last point, as far as experimentation, it has begun. It can be as simple as legal teams using AI to go through legal docs, lease agreements. Um, we've heard some groups will put on their investment committee an AI, that they get that kind of fifth person, seventh person on their investment committee. You just make that an AI, and you can have a completely robotic kind of viewpoint on some of these investments. You have some groups using it for uh, locations for properties. If we're going to go develop something, have AI go through the Northeast and identify land for what would be best situated for multifamily or industrial. So there's a lot of different ways that groups are doing it. I think a lot of groups are starting at different spots. But ultimately, I'd say these are kind of the four things that we're hearing, again, from a pretty good representation from the real estate investment universe, um, of what they're doing. And I think, again, another thing that's going to impact it is how are they set up? Are you a GP that's more of an allocator model? Are you vertically integrated? Do you have that property management in-house? So that's another thing. It just depends on how these companies are positioned. Um, I would say one thing that you hear a lot of groups pushing is kind of just really establishing that kind of culture, that you want to have a culture where you're at least educated and you know what it is, versus kind of burying your head in the sand. I think we're past the point where it's just a nice to have theoretical, ooh, what's this technology going to do? And it is more, you're seeing a lot more urgency to kind of build that mindset of, this is something we have to do. It's going to be a core competency of ours. So I would say those are some of the things. And I'd say one point Jeff kind of brought up in the slide, kind of this wide adoption in late 2022. I do find it interesting. It coincides with a rising rate environment where real estate became tougher. um, you have a lot more groups focused on asset management, trying to drive NOI, because for 15 years, it was just a continual low falling interest rate environment. Now it's kind of getting back outside of a capital markets game and more into, we got to get down to like the property level. We got to drive NOI. What are the tools we can use? So I find it interesting. It wasn't something in 2018 low rate environment where this came about. AI coincided with a rising rate environment where groups are looking to do more at that kind of asset management level. So I'll pause there. But yeah, those would be some key takeaways, just coinciding with the poll you did, what we're hearing. So I'd say those are just some of the key points I see.
Chase, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Thanks for that perspective. You definitely have a vast and unique perspective given where you sit and the members that you have. And I know that they're, of all sizes. So it's a great representation of the market. I have the benefit of leading the client success team. So both myself and our client success managers are really the conduit between our clients and Pairview in terms of development and innovation. And we're hearing from them a lot about AI, and they're curious about how do we get started? What are other peers doing? What are your clients doing? What is Pairview doing? So, that first question around what to do first is a big one. And our clients, and I'm not surprised by the high percentage in the poll that said they're utilizing AI. We're absolutely hearing that across our entire client base, but they are struggling with, what do we do first? So our recommendation to them is to start with some questions or reports that you want to address and you want to have answered. And there's certain data that feeds into those reports and into those questions, and you should start with that data. It's really about getting your data structured in a way that as you're running it through any of these AI machines and tools, you have confidence that the data is good and is going to provide good results, which kind of leads to the next thing, right? Data governance. Okay, we're putting all this data into these AI tools, but GPs, LPs are really sensitive to, one, they want to control their data. Two, everyone has a little bit of a secret sauce or secret ingredients that makes for their investment thesis and their business. They have PII data, sensitive investor information. So they really do need to be careful and tread lightly in terms of what are they putting into some of those public machines? How could they ring fence that to ensure that that information isn't getting out into the ether and benefits other people in the space, or just creates a data breach? So that's a major concern, and another reason to start a little bit smaller with controlled data sets. So the other thing that I'll add is our clients are not necessarily expecting AI to provide a lot of predictive intelligence. And, Jeff talked about this a little bit as well, that, we're early days here. So our clients are looking for tools to help them summarize comments and break down documents and, some tasks that are labor intensive and time intensive. Our clients are using AI and thinking about AI to short circuit some of those things and not quite yet getting into the predictive space.
Yeah, and I would just add one thing, because you're talking about control over data, the security, kind of that compliance that everybody has to deal with. And then I'd say a third point goes back to that garbage in, garbage out. I think the accuracy, that we're in a world where a business where mistakes, yeah, it's not okay. You have to have the correct data. It has to be the right reporting, or yeah, you could get in a lot of trouble and ruin some relationships with your investors. So I think that's another thing, is just, it goes back to, the old school Excel kind of coming onto the scene. It is that garbage in, garbage out, where you've got to make sure everything's accurate. Otherwise, yeah, you'll be in, again, a lot of trouble and probably struggle to raise more money. So I put that accuracy kind of component in there as a huge one, outside of the controlling your data and, yeah, dealing with your compliance demands.
Well, thank you both for that. I appreciate that. And I do want to ask you, Jeff, for your perspective, again, as a career real estate industry technologist, can you share with us, your thoughts on where we stand with AI in real estate in this context?
Sure. And let's, if we can, go ahead and advance and at least, so now we want to move to a part of the presentation where we're getting more and more practical and hopefully more and more specific in terms of exactly what it is that we can do in real estate. So in order to do that, we want to first start off with our perspective on where AI is today and what we can do with it today, not necessarily futuristic, but today. And so we like, there was a quote by Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT. And this is a fairly recent quote, but he said AI is really good at automating the 1 to 3 minute tasks. It starts to fall off at like a 5-minute task. And today it's nowhere near being able to do something that would be like 1,000 man-hour task, like, some deep math or medical research. And Sam actually goes on to say he's not even sure if AI will ever get to that point. And so back up for a second and say, hey, well, oh my gosh, there's all these trillions of dollars spent. Why is it only good today at this 1 to 3 minute task? And let's understand that first, and then we'll progress into things that apply to real estate. But one, AI can only do what it's been trained to do. Point number one. Point number two, therefore, it's most effective at what we kind of call the middle task, meaning, a human needs to start the process. AI can do the things in the middle. And then we think today a human needs to validate the output or the outcome of that AI task. That whole thing is really referred to as human in the loop, which for most of these things, we think that's the safest, best approach. Why do we say that? One thing that's very common about AI, especially if you're using the large language models tech in the AI stack, is that AI hallucinates, meaning AI, even if you have given it the right answer over and over again, 1 out of every 100 times or whatever, it'll actually give you, if you ask the exact same question, it'll actually give you the wrong answer. And let me give you a quick example on that. So, again, Prairie View Software, we're effectively an asset portfolio management system. We aggregate data across the entire life of the asset. One of the things that we're doing as a company is leveraging AI to help automate the ingestion of rent rolls and financials. We're currently working on commercial leases and loans. But when we started working on rent rolls, there's tons of different flavors of rent rolls. Yardi produces a lot of different ones, as does MRI and all these other systems out there. And we actually would put these files in to train. And we told AI, hey, listen, this Excel file, as an example, is a Yardi tenancy schedule 1. This is a tenancy schedule 2. This is a one-site rent roll, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we sent thousands and thousands of these things through just so that it could recognize and categorize the file as to what it was, not pull data out yet. And honestly, initially, 1 to 5% of the times it would hallucinate. Even when given the right answer, it would come up with something wrong, right? So that's why at this point in time, let's automate the simple tasks, not the higher value add tasks that are repeatable and that have been standardized, that take, 1 to 3 minutes. Anything past that, we're kind of going to be a little bit out over our skis. And so that's our perspective on where we are with AI. And so now let's just spend a minute talking about how we might apply that at the macro level within our own industry verticals. So Julie, if you could advance the slide a little bit to this and the next box. And so we've kind of, again, this is a little bit simplistic, but we think this provides a good framework, at least to start thinking through things. So we think that in the property management function, there are more 1 to 3 minute tasks that frankly are lower value add, which means lower skill set labor are able to perform those tasks. And therefore, there are more opportunities to provide AI type automation in that part of our overall value chain versus in the investment management space, where have people with master's degree in finance or certainly college degrees with, econ, finance, accounting, et cetera. Not that there aren't 1 to 3 minute tasks, and not that there aren't things that AI can't provide lift and automation for, but it's just going to require more human in the loop, less 100% automation in this area today than we think in the property management space. And one of the questions that we get routinely is, when we look at these things, people will say, well, hey, is this going to lead to mass unemployment? With all this automation, and you hear people like Elon Musk and others say, hey, 5 years from now, there's going to be a bunch of Tesla robots and you're not going to need to work and all this abundance and whatever. Our perspective is we're not sure that we bought into that future just yet. We'd love for it to come, but we also aren't really bought in to, the mass unemployment and the mass layoffs. Will it make people more productive and efficient? Yes. But we also think, just like when Henry Ford invented kind of the assembly line for the cars, did that put the horse and buggy industry out of business? Eventually, yes. But it also created all kinds of industries and other things that in the 19 teens, frankly, nobody was going to be able to forecast and predict, like the interstate highway system and the car culture in America. And we now have hotels and motels along the interstate highway system. And so where this goes, I think at this point, we're not in the first inning, but we're certainly not, in the fourth or fifth. We're still very early. I think it's going to be very difficult to predict the big impact of these tools. And so pause real quick for Ron or Chase, if you've got any other questions. If not, we can continue to move on to some more specific examples.
Yeah, Jeff, I'll jump in with a couple things just to, emphasize what you shared based on what our clients are sharing. Our clients also don't feel like this is going to eliminate people. They don't think that they're going to have the cost of doing business with the payroll and benefits line item is going to go down by 20%, but rather what we're talking about here are tools, an additional tool in the tool set for their teams to make better, faster, more efficient decisions, deliver reports and information quicker, faster, and in a way that can be consumed easier by the internal and external stakeholders. And in terms of some of the complex things, humans are not going away. Humans need to interact and teach these LLMs about the business. And investment management is complicated, highly structured, lots of moving parts, and there's so much information to aggregate to make a decision that the human needs to be a part of that process and utilizing the tools along the way to, again, create efficiencies and just make everyone more effective. So, we're hearing that our clients are saying, don't worry about your job. You're going to have a job. What we'd like to do is we'd like to empower you to make this a part of your business norm and find ways to utilize AI to create time and space for you to do more value add things.
Well, the one thing I would add is I think the gut reaction is to go down that futurist kind of like mindset, robots and human beings being displaced. And I think the best example I heard from someone in the industry is you got to think about it more like a power drill, that you went from a handheld screwdriver to a power drill. That's more what this is as far as freeing up time to do strategic things. I think rather than viewing it as something that will replace human beings, I'm not saying it won't for some of these tasks, but I think it's more freeing up people that would be going through rent rolls and things like that. And it's more just giving them more time to do things more strategically and make the overall teams more effective, more efficient than just it's going to be one or two people at a real estate shop and then everything else is AI. I think that's kind of where sometimes the mindset can go. It's more, yeah, you have these people, you're just making them more efficient with their time by giving them these tools.
All right. Well, I think that both of you, really all of the panelists, you all share different perspectives, which are really, really valuable. But I'd like to take a moment and Jeff, if you wouldn't mind commenting on this next slide, let's just dive into some of those suggestions you made and we talked about formerly just a little bit deeper. Can you kind of take us through that and what your thoughts are and vision for that in the industry today?
Hey, I'm sorry, I lost connection. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's go ahead and advance the slide. So, again, we're kind of going from the theoretical to the practical, and we've taken just a handful of examples at the property management area and at the investment management area to reiterate these are directional and illustrative, not necessarily hard and concrete. But as an example, there's an AI software firm out there called Predict AP, and we're friends with them. We know the firm out of Austin, Texas, and that software, and this is the best example of a simple 1 to 3 minute test. This software focuses on just the coding aspect of the invoice, of getting that invoice in and making sure that it's coded to the right GL accounts. That is a very black and white, simple, straightforward task. And people that we know that use it, have good results with it, right? So great example of that. Another example, Elise AI is somewhat popular in the property management space. We've got certainly a handful of our clients that we know of, at least, that are using it. It's intended to kind of be a tenant resident communications platform, so the tenants can call in or can make outbound calls to remind them to pay the bills on time and all that kind of stuff. We hear mixed results with that relative to hey, we can reduce our staff at the property level from X to Y or something like that. We're also hearing a little bit of results like people saying, hey, well, now that we've got this Elise AI tool to do this, I as the human don't have to, which iterates or reinforces the point that technology isn't always just about the technology. It's also about the people and the processes around it using that technology. Another great area where we see benefits, frankly, both in property management and in investment management, would be just workflow tools. So taking something that routes, something from person A to person B for approval. It could be approval of a big commercial lease or reviewing quarterly reports or something like that. We do think there's really good opportunities for that. Areas that we would say really, need more human in the loop than less would be some of these other software products under the investment management space, like Creffy and Cactus, who say that they really automate a lot of the underwriting process. And the tools are cool. I'll admit a lot of what they're doing that I think is in that safe zone is you've got the ability to drag and drop documents in, and it can scrape data out of like an offering memorandum or something like that to then put it in a structured environment that then allows you to do better human analysis and stuff. And so the simple task, again, and they would say, if you looked at the tools, human is still in the loop, validating that the data that they've scraped out is actually accurate. To reiterate Chase's point earlier, the dollars in this space are too big not to validate that what we're doing is 100% accurate, because 85% accurate just isn't good enough, right? So I think over time, we will see more and more tools kind of in this investment management space get more and more mature in the things that they are doing to drive more and more automation. But this is just where we are today.
Well, thank you for that, Jeff. I appreciate it. So now it sounds like we have a decent idea of what are some prioritized areas of business where AI can help and be helpful. But then I think there's also another question that everyone, including myself, is interested in diving a little bit deeper into, and that is practically how to get started. So can you sort of frame up for us just a general pathway, what's realistic, what that looks like?
Yeah, we're going to adopt the approach of crawl, walk, run. Let's not just jump in and try to do the advanced AI things that are going to automate everything. We got to get things organized and standardized and kind of get our house in order first in order to be able to leverage some of these other pieces of technology. And so, Jill, you can go ahead and advance these slides. And as you do, I'll just give a warning to the audience that these things may not sound very sexy and exciting, but oftentimes, pouring the foundation, which you have to do before you build a house, never really is sexy and exciting. But honestly, that's what has to be done in this space before we're really going to be in a position to almost do anything, whether it's doing the simple stuff like Microsoft Copilot or even implementing, peer review, which is a full kind of automation on the front office. I will also say this, as I go through this, we've got, a much more detailed step-by-step process that we're going to send out for all those who to stay to the end via email that will really help you walk through a lot of the stuff in greater detail. We just didn't have the time to do this in one session. And if when you get that, it still feels a little overwhelming and like, gosh, I don't know where to start, feel free to reach out to us at Peer Review. We're happy to get on the phone and spend an hour or something like that, just to kind of get you into the right direction and where to go. The premise of this, however, is that we really need to standardize our data, because you can't automate something that's not repeatable and standardized, right? And we really need to get things organized, because if data is scattered all in different types of places and OneDrive or Box or this and that, whatnot, again, that makes automation even more difficult. I'll also say a lot of these steps vary based on kind of what your data flow is. And this is a gross simplification, I realize that, but we kind of tend to put data flows into one of two buckets. One, which is you've got an internal accounting system, Yardi, MRI, whatever, Etrata, and that's one data flow. And clearly you'll be better off with that, because in essence, you've kind of already started the process to at least organize your accounting data, right? The second data flow we characterize as decentralized, which is, and honestly, there's a lot of people that still do this, but it's every single month you're getting what's referred to as the monthly packet, typically from your property management or operating partner, that's got last month's financials and a rent roll and maybe a PDF that's got variance commentary on it. If that's the data flow that you live in, you're going to have a little bit more work to do, right, to get things standardized and organized. And honestly, a lot of these bullet points will focus more on the decentralized data flow than on the centralized. So let's just go through this real quick. This may sound obvious, but honestly, standardize your financial metrics. What do I mean by that? Anything that's in the monthly or quarterly internal or to investor reporting package, whatever those metrics are, and we all kind of use different words to describe these things, like carry value or all-in gross purchase price, invested equity, total assets under management, or maybe use equity under management, et cetera. Spend the time and energy to make sure the math behind all those metrics are the same math. And you may say, well, gosh, well, of course they are. I would just say maybe, you know, when we implement peer review with our clients, it's not 100% of the time, but it's really common for us when we kind of get into kind of decomposing the portfolio models or the fund models. If you've got a series of like value add funds or whatever, invariably we will see that the math behind value fund 1 isn't the same math as value fund 4 or 5, because it's all done in Excel, right? And so just know that more than likely today you've got inconsistencies in that area. And so we would say these financial metrics also need to tie to a set of accounts in a standard, consistent, global corporate chart of accounts, so that you're all singing off of the same financial page when you go to report on these financial metrics. The same's true with operational metrics, like lease percentage, lease percentage and occupied percentage. And you can say, well, gosh, what's the issue there? From our experience, a lot of companies have different methodologies for lease percentage and occupied percentage. And a lot of it has to deal with the lease but not occupied. And so as an example, it's October 22nd. Let's say you've got a space that's leased starting December 1. What do you do with that? Do you include those numbers in your percent occupied lease numbers or not? And you get different answers for that. And sometimes you get different answers based on property type. And sometimes you get different answers based on who you're asking within that same company and organization. So spend the time focusing on people and process to get standardization in these areas, so that when you're ready to spend time and money trying to automate these routine tasks around reporting, using software, using whatever, it's going to go quicker and faster. And you'll need people and process around to maintain these things after an implementation of an AI tool or a piece of packaged software, et cetera. So again, we've got a lot more detailed steps on that we will be sending out later on today at the conclusion of this meeting.
Well, and if I could just weigh in real quickly on some
Yeah.
of this, it is interesting because you start looking at this and I feel like, again, going back to the crawl, walk, run, there's a mindset that you can just go straight to bringing on these AI tools and it's going to do all these things for you. That there is, and I've used the example, I don't know if it's a good one, but I look at like my kids and like cleaning up their closet. It's like the idea that you can just like have a messy closet and just put like a robot vacuum in there and it'll be all clean and organized. It's like that's where I think it is. Like this view of AI can just be something that can just be implemented and it's going to clean up everything for you. That that I think is a flawed assumption that it's just going to do a lot of that labor that still needs to be done, like standardizing these financials. I think that's something where the I think the relief that people should feel is like a lot of the implementing AI tools goes back to things that are within your control that don't require a ton of investment. It just goes to kind of that standardizing these financial metrics, KPIs, things like that, that's the first step in the crawling is just getting all of this organized. Or you could even take a step back. The crawl could just be the education, having people on board with it. So I think that's where I think people get over their skis is just, I need to jump straight to getting an AI tool. And I think more than anything, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like it's more, you need to first do these things that are well within your control. And you might think that you have it, but for AI to use it, you might have to go another step of standardizing that you're not even doing yet. Because I think a lot of groups can have the view like, oh, well, we are standardized. We have all these things nice and clean. It might not be clean enough for AI to fully add value to it. So I don't know if that's a fair assumption. That's just the way I look at it is like you might feel like you are to that point that everything's standardized, but you're not standardized enough. The data is not clean enough
Yeah.
to be implemented yet.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Chase, and not to to continue to go too far down the path, but just from a practical experience, Jeff talked a little bit about this, but as we implement PeerView software and then take it a step further, we have a data management services team that is an extension of our clients team where we are managing the collection, input, and validation of daily, weekly, monthly financial metrics, tenant data, rent rolls, etc. And invariably, there is at least an investment in every portfolio that we work on that when we're going through our validation process, we're finding that the data is not right because accounts were added to a chart of accounts. The data is not standardized. Occupancy is calculated 3 different ways because if someone has moved out of a unit and it's vacant, but it's now rented and they're moving in next week, should that be occupied or unoccupied? What other occupancy calculation do we want to utilize to determine that? We're finding that our clients don't even realize that they've been getting bad data, getting incorrect information, and then reporting that out, both internally and externally to their stakeholders. So I don't think we can put, a big enough point on how important this is to the entire process of utilizing, relying, and rolling out AI. The data has to be right. And, just thinking about the crawl, walk, run approach again, I'm a big proponent of starting with a subset of your data. You can't boil the ocean here with every data point and every calculation that you're utilizing, but there are certain things that are probably more important and easier to standardize and validate. So starting with a subset of the data and then continuing to work through that is something that we've seen to be very successful for our clients.
Well, thank you, Ron. I think that's a great segue into really the next point, which is thinking about, what are some other important things to consider? I know when we were planning for this event, there were quite a few considerations that need to be made. And so can you just kind of walk us through that a little bit in depth?
Sure, happy to. And if you can flash the rest of the bullets up, Julie,
Sure.
thank you. So we firmly believe that when you think about AI and what the ROI you want on that investment to be, is that you should really be thinking about AI and technology in general as the tool and a solution that you would implement to gain efficiencies in your processes, which leads to being able to have your team and your people spend more time on high value, thoughtful, intelligent things. You want to focus on compliance and ensuring that the technology that you're implementing, the flow of data is going to be set up in such a way and with a provider that is mindful of compliance. At Paraview, we're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, and I won't necessarily tell you what all of that means, but we take data privacy and compliance very seriously, and we do that as a good steward to our clients. So that needs to be something that is top of mind as you're thinking about implementing technology and bringing all this data together for these uses. The last thing is to mitigate risk, and maybe even before you're mitigating risk, identifying risk. Where do we have opportunities to see risk or start to predict risk a little bit earlier, because we've got everything in one place, and we don't have to ask an analyst a question who then has to go open up 10 spreadsheets because all of our deals are in different spreadsheets, only to come back 3 weeks later and share some news or some data points that are inherent risk in the portfolio or the investment. The next big thing for everyone to strongly consider is who owns your data, and we talked a lot about this, but the open AI platforms that you're putting your data into, those companies are going to continue to consume that data and leverage that data, and it's out there in the ether, and it's open source. A lot of our clients are taking an approach to own or license that technology within their organization. So they ring fence that, if you will, so that they're not putting data into some machine or some technology platform that is aggregating other people's data and other information that someone may be able to get access to. So who owns your data? Your approach to that is something that that really needs to be strongly considered, and we can help with those questions and best practices as well. And then the last thing that we've talked a lot about this, but it's starting simple. So I do believe that making this a tool and empowering your teams and your people to start to leverage AI and just to do some things. Copilot in Excel is very easy. A lot of our clients are using the Microsoft stack, and there are tools in there. So you can very quickly start to utilize these tools and get results out of that very quickly. So Chase, I'll stop there, and curious if you and your members have any thoughts around some of these things that everyone needs to consider as they move into this AI driven future.
Well, I think again, there's differentiating between kind of the GPs and the LPs. And we continue to hear LPs maybe slower. You can have a public pension that's dealing with kind of the board, the treasurer, like you have kind of political components that could cause a delay on their front as far as them implementing it. But you can't confuse that with they want their GPs to be implementing it. So I think one thing to keep in mind that as far as I think building a sense of urgency, like even if you're crawling, like you better start crawling now. Because I think that is something where capital being the lifeblood of investment management, real estate, I mean, to raise money, you're going to have to point to something that you're doing. Because I think it's now reached the point where the view of an organization that isn't implementing AI to a certain degree is rapidly going to be viewed as archaic and outdated and all the other bad things you don't want to be considered. You don't want your brand to be tied to, oh, this group doesn't do anything, they're falling behind. So I think that's an important thing to consider is regardless of what you want to do, costs, obviously all these things factor into just these businesses. I think you need to understand that increasingly and rapidly, it's those investors that want to make sure they're not investing with a real estate group that is just archaic in the way they're doing things. So I would say that's where, again, you might be at the crawling phase, but I would urge you to start crawling as fast as you can.
Urge you to start crawling. All right, well, that's well put.
And this genuinely isn't even a plug for Paraview. I think this is more just in general. I mean, we're talking like crawling could just be educating more, having more discussions internally. I mean, it is literally we're talking foundational things that I think it's just you have to get to the point where this isn't a fad that's just going to go away. And that's, I think, an important change in mindset that these organizations need to have. And that's maybe even the most important point is just change the mindset in the way that you're looking at it, because it can be cost. There's obviously costs involved. There's other things that you're looking at as just a business in this type of a market where it's like, geez, can we afford to do this? Can we bring on 2 more people to help us? So that's where at least starting with just education, joining this webinar is obviously even a good step. So there's at least some things that can be done that are within your control other than just like, we need $10 million of investment to build out an AI platform. So I think that's something that I look at this as far as other important things to consider. I think it's a big thing is just mindset. And get to like point 3, it doesn't have to be this crazy, investment, bringing in a futurist to be in your company. It can be very simple things right now.
Well, that's actually a perfect thought that's going to lead us to our next point, which is if some of the individuals attending today or those that are in the industry want to do more, a lot of times the do more looks like a build versus buy decision. And Ron, I know since you're working with our clients, can you help us understand some of the considerations we need to have around those areas and what the benefits and trade-offs may be?
I can actually have some thoughts, more than are on that slide right now. So Julie, you can pop those in if you don't mind. And I'm looking at the clock. I know we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go through this briefly. But if anyone wants to dig into this further, get our perspective, get Chase's perspective, Jeff, myself, and Chase are all happy to schedule a meeting after this. But it really does come down to a decision that you need to make today. And I love Chase's point that, crawl now, start crawling, because if you don't build or buy, you're choosing to do nothing. And that's not the right choice. You need to move forward with a decision here, and you need to start small and start utilizing these tools. So I'm not going to go through all the bullets that are on the build versus buy, but what I would say is the large global firms are probably leaning more towards a build in most cases versus buying or licensing software. And they can do that because they've got large IT teams. They have a funding ability to fund large projects that could take a long time to produce results. Or you can license the software and buy that software. What I'd caution everyone is even the largest firms, the CBRE types of scale, sure, they may be building some things internally, but they are also licensing other softwares. And what we found to be successful is not focusing on the build. You should focus on what your job is, which is investing capital and delivering returns for your stakeholders and your investors. And then you can partner with a firm that is in the software space that can help you with those decisions and help with your internal initiatives. And that's what a lot of our clients are focused on. They have AI initiatives internally, but they want to partner with us and they want to make sure that we're going down the same path together. And they don't want to take on really large initiatives that we're taking on behalf of this industry and on behalf of our client base. They don't want to do that in a bespoke way. So happy to talk about this further if anyone wants to, but we're seeing a lot of success with partnering with our clients around these decisions and around these initiatives on a go-forward basis.
Thanks a lot for that. Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to share 2 primary questions that we received. The first one, I'd like to point to you, Jeff, for the response is, where would you expect the most resistance within your firm? And I think that is resistance to AI adoption, the context for that.
Yeah, I think it's people, and change is difficult. And it's not necessarily AI, but I think you add the added, media hype around AI of massive job displacement that's going to add more to the resistance to adopt new technologies. And so that's easily overcome with leadership, and with leadership casting a clear vision of what they're wanting to do with any technology initiative.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question that we had that I think we can squeeze in is which is similar to that, how are technology and AI reshaping staffing needs, outsourcing decisions, and organizational workflows? So Jeff, why don't you just kind of share a little bit about appending with the comment you just made, and then also if Ron and Chase could also bring in your perspectives, I'd appreciate that.
I do think we're seeing more interest in firms wanting to partner or leverage technology to do things because I think they realize, one, we don't have the staff internally to do this. We don't have the IP, the knowledge, the know-how to do this. And we can probably get to a better benefit if we can leverage what somebody else has done already in the form of a software package or whatever to get quicker value to the organization. So we're seeing much more in the partnership. We haven't really seen anything on the internal layoff. If anything else, it's just making the existing staff more productive.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jeff. And to your point about people resistance with the first question that someone asked, what I would say is, if you're in this space and you are looking to retain top talent and attract top talent, you need to have AI initiatives and tools, because the best and brightest that are in the market want to work at companies that have a vision around AI. They're utilizing these tools. They're future casting their career, and it's important for them to be at a company that has a real initiative around this. Otherwise, they're not going to build the skill sets that they need to be successful in this space, as we think about AI being a very important tool in the future.
I would just add, I think the concern about being replaced by AI, I think the bigger concern should be being replaced for being a Luddite. You have
Being a what?
someone that doesn't adopt technology.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, there's a bigger risk of being replaced if you're not on board with some sort of tech implementation around AI. I'd be more, if I was sitting in that chair, I'd be more concerned that I wasn't willing to become more tech savvy in this industry than worried about an AI chatbot taking my job.
I agree. All right. Well, thank you all so much. We appreciate everyone that came today. I just wanted to share that you all will be receiving, as we mentioned, this helpful guide for organizing your data, which we've talked quite a bit about today. And you won't have to download it. We'll actually send it to you directly. Also, we just want to thank you. This is our QR code. If you would like to learn more about how ParaView as a platform is helping modernize asset management in the industry by doing a lot of this heavy lifting of your data, organizing it, and making it available for you in one platform throughout the life of the asset. Also, we have a series survey we'd like you to fill out. Just tell us how we did. And thanks a lot for your time. We appreciate it. And have a great day. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.